Hello and welcome to the Festive Tech Calendar 2021, where I'm going to take you through my Presenting in Teams Masterclass. Now, before we get started, a quick intro to me. I'm Zoe Wilson and I'm the Director of Innovation and Customer Success at a UK partner called Agilysys. And I'm a Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services. I've worked with SharePoint and Teams for many years. And I like to think of myself as a technology evangelist, and I'm incredibly passionate about driving transformation with tech as the enabler that allows it all to happen. I also get super passionate about things like accessibility and inclusion. I'm an active member of the Women in Tech community, and actually I'd love to make a shout out for anybody who wants to join the Women in Teams community. We're absolutely looking to connect women and allies who work with teams from around the world to create a really supportive network. Okay, so just to break down what we're going to cover today, the first thing we're going to do is look at why this matters. So why is it important for you to be able to use for you to be able to present like a rock star in Microsoft Teams? And for you to be able to do this, it's really important that you get the basics right. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on some of the basics of Teams meetings to make sure that you can use those properly before moving into the magic that is PowerPoint Live. I'm going to give you everything that you need to know about PowerPoint Live, including some of the dynamic presenter view options we've got as well, to help you know how to look good in your meetings. And then I'm going to finish off with some additional tips and tricks that will help you rock your next presentation. Okay, so why this matters? Well, I think it's fair to say that whether we like it or not, virtual is here to stay. We're starting to see lockdowns, rumours of lockdowns, around Europe and around the world. And, even when we look at hybrid work, with some people going back into the office, part-time, some full-time, we've got hybrid events, we've got events that will stay virtual. So it's super important that you know how to do this if this is something that's going to stick around. And the beautiful thing is actually that it's easy to do. So the tech makes it really easy for you to look good and be able to deliver engaging presentations. And if you do it right, you can deliver a really slick presentation that makes you look super professional. The other benefit for me, by presenting properly in Teams and knowing how to use the technology, you can make sure that your content is more accessible to your audience. And actually, we all suffer a lot of brain drain, I think, and meeting fatigue from back-to-back calls. So knowing how to make your content more engaging and knowing how to deliver it more effectively in the Teams meeting environment will help reduce some of that meeting fatigue by stimulating different parts of the brain within your audience. Okay, so like I said, getting the Teams meeting basics right is super important before we get on to using advanced features. And there are some things that you should do actually before you even get into the meeting. And getting these right will really set you up for success. So, purpose. All meetings should have a clear purpose. What is it you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to reach a decision? Are you, is the purpose of bringing everybody together for a discussion or a brainstorming session or whiteboarding? Is it to relay information to an audience in the form of a presentation? And it's super important that you actually think about this before you start planning the meeting or the presentation, because the purpose may change the way that you choose to run this and the way that you choose to present your content in the session. It's equally important that all meetings have an agenda as well, so that people know what to expect throughout. And, if you've got people who are going to be on point for delivering bits of it, it's really important that they're actually aware of that as well. Then you've got your invitees. So this is where you need to walk a little bit of a balancing act, actually, because you want to make sure that your invite list is diverse and will give you a representative and diverse set of viewpoints from across your organisation or customers or, whoever it is that's your audience. But you also don't want to just invite every person and their dog, because that's not an effective use of people's time. And actually, when you've got really big, unwieldy meetings, it can be quite difficult to achieve what you're trying to achieve, really. So you need to make sure that for meetings where the purpose is, reaching a decision or collaboration or something like that, that you've got a diverse list, but it's limited to only those who are necessary. And if the purpose is to present and share information, then it's also worth thinking about whether this can be recorded and shared with attendees who may not be able to make it, because that provides another way of respecting people's diaries as well. And then the last thing that you want to do, or the last thing I'll call out that you want to do before your team meeting, is make sure that you share any pre-reading or prep work ahead of time as well, so that people who are required to input or make a decision have the opportunity to get their head around what it is you're asking them before you bring them into the meeting. Okay, so moving on to Basics Teams meeting controls. Now, I'm hoping that you're all familiar with the bar that you can see across the screen for the meeting. And what we're going to do is just whiz through really quickly all of the different options that you've got here, and just make sure that you're really familiar with them. And if you're not, go and practice these. Make sure that you know how to confidently navigate around the Teams meeting window first, before starting to move into some of the more advanced presenting stuff, as it will just feel a lot more natural. It'll feel a lot easier for you. So first up, on the left hand side, you've got this little grid. So this Teams meeting control will allow you essentially to change your Teams meeting display. And the important thing to note is that this setting is only going to change the view for you, and it won't impact the display for anybody else. So you could switch to a large gallery view if you've got enough people on the call, for example. So if you've got more than 9 people, you can change to large gallery, and it will show everybody who has their camera on the screen. But it will only do that for you. It wouldn't do that for me at all. And likewise, you could put together mode on in your Teams meeting view, but I'd also have to do that on my view as well for us both to see that. Now, the only slight exception here is when it comes to the backgrounds that you've got in together mode. So if I go into together mode and change the background layout, that will change it for everybody in the meeting. So if anybody turns together mode on, it will change it for all of them. And then the last point, you can also change how content is displayed within your team meeting as well. So you could have the gallery at the top, you could focus on the content, or you could have the content full screen as well. And equally, these settings are only for your view of the meeting. Now, moving on, we've got the little people icon, and if you hit that, brings up the list of meeting participants. Hopefully you're familiar with this already. But from here, you can find participants, you can add new people to the meeting, you can mute attendees, you can view raised hands, you can promote people from attendee to presenter, or vice versa. If you've got controls on what attendees are allowed to do, you can also come in here and change those as well. So if attendees are not allowed to come off mute, for example, you can come in here and change that for an individual if they want to contribute. So this is a super useful part of the meeting, and if I find it really valuable to keep an eye on this as you're going through the meeting, because the raised hands thing in particular is super important. If someone puts their hand up, they'll be at the top of this list and you can see them. The other thing that is just worth noting as well is there's a new feature that's in public preview at the moment, which actually has numbering on the raised hands. So if I put my hand up first, it will have a number 1 for me, and then the next person would have a number 2. So it helps you keep track of the order that hands are being raised in the meeting, which is really, really valuable. Okay, so moving on one more, we've got the meeting chat button. So pressing this will open and close the meeting chat. Meeting participants will be able to use this to comment, reply, chat throughout the meeting. And it can be really useful to make sure that you can keep an eye on this as well during the meeting, so that you don't miss important messages or questions. And I do think it's really important to be able to keep an eye on this, because you might have people on the call who are deaf, who aren't actually able to speak verbally in that virtual meeting environment. You might have people who are sat at home with a crying baby on their lap, or a dog barking, or they're in transit, or something like that, where it's not optimal for them to speak, but they have something valid to say or a question to ask. So using the chat in that way is perfectly valid. The one danger that you do have sometimes is that people will go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So, set some expectations at the start, set some ground rules, and encourage people to avoid sub-conversations because it can be distracting from what you're saying as the presenter. Okay, so moving on one more, we've got the guy giving a high five. He's not actually, he's just raising his hand. But this is the button that you hit if you want to raise your hand. The other thing that you can also do here is reactions as well. And I love reactions because it's a really great way of giving instant feedback to the presenter or speaker in a meeting. I love speaking in person. I love the instant visual, the instant feedback you get from the crowd in terms of body language and the way that people kind of sit and look and the facial expressions and everything. And I really miss that when I'm speaking virtually. And the live reactions, they're no kind of replacement for that, but I do think that they provide a form of validation. And they are just a super great way of being able to interact and react within a meeting in a positive way. So if you don't use these already, I'd encourage you to start using them. And if you're presenting, what you want is kind of lots of applause or love hearts when you're talking. And then the other option is to raise your hand. So with the reactions, they'll only last for a few seconds, and then they'll go away. Whereas when you raise your hand, it will essentially stay there until you or until somebody else in the meeting forcibly takes that down for you. So it's important to make sure that there's some good hand control in the meeting. I've been in tons of meetings where, someone puts their hand up and they're prompted to ask the question or contribute, say whatever's on their mind. And then they do that and they forget to take it down, and it comes back around to them a couple of minutes later and they're asked again, and they're like, oh, sorry, old hand. So, make sure you put your hand down when you finish talking as well, just to allow the meeting to kind of flow properly. And if you're the person who's kind of presenting or leading the meeting, make sure that if someone misses it, that you're doing that as well, just so that you allow the presentation to kind of keep its flow without being disturbed. Okay, so moving on again, the next button that we've got is for breakout rooms. And as the meeting organizer, you can create breakout rooms, you can assign participants, you can kind of you can open the room and push people to it, you can call people back from the rooms, that you can publish announcements into the rooms. They're super useful from a collaboration perspective. And you could do this actually before the meeting starts or at any point during the meeting as well. So we're not going to dwell on these today, but I do think, again, that you should be familiar with how these work and how to use them. And I'd encourage you to go and have a play around with them if you're not familiar already. Right, okay, so moving on again, we've got the three dots in the middle of the screen, so the little ellipsis, and when you click on this, it's going to open up a menu of additional Teams meeting options. So you can see this in the screenshot on the side of the screen. And from within here, you can do things like start and stop recording, you can turn on live captions for yourself, you can apply background effects to your camera, you can access things like device settings, so change where the audio or speakers are coming from, change the camera. You can look at the call health and view any additional meeting information you can view in here as well. So again, it's just something to be familiar with. Moving on again, you've got the camera icon, fairly self-explanatory. It's going to turn your camera on and off. The thing that I love there is if you hover over the button, it's going to pop up the private preview menu. So only you can see this until you press the button to actually turn your camera on. And what this lets you do is make sure that actually, do you look presentable? Have you got anything, embarrassing in the background? Do you need to blur it? Do you need to put, a different background effect on? Are you using the right camera? Because you might have an external camera and a laptop camera. So this gives you the option to kind of control how you look to the people in the audience before you actually turn that on, which I absolutely love. Then you've got the microphone, again, another really self-explanatory one. Pressing this button is going to mute and unmute you. And it is super important to have good mic control. I think "you're on mute" is perhaps one of the most overused phrases of the pandemic. Although not the most overused, that one's coming up shortly. But it is one of the most overused. So make sure that you've got good mic control. And, if you've got noisy people in your audience, make sure you know how to mute them as well, which was back on that participants view. All right, so we've actually skipped a button here and gone right to the end, to the leave button. And again, pretty obvious, hit leave. Going to take you out of the meeting. But the thing that I like here and that I want more people to be aware of is the little drop down that you've got next to leave. Because if you're the meeting organizer, you get an extra feature here. And what happens if you hit that drop down, what you'll see is this little box that you've got on the side of the screen here, where underneath leave you can actually end the meeting. And what this will do is force all of the meeting attendees to leave the meeting. Now, I'm sure you've seen long-running meetings where you've got one person who's kind of maybe they might have put the meeting on hold, or they've wandered off halfway through a presentation and it's ended and they've not realised yet. But by knowing how to do this, you can actually kick them out and force that meeting to stop, which is fantastic. All right, so this is the last in the basic Teams meeting controls that we've got, and it's arguably the most important one and the one where we're going to spend quite a bit of time today. And this essentially is the share tray. So when you hit this, it opens up the share tray where you, as the presenter, can select the content that you wish to present into the meeting. So from in here, you can choose different presenter modes. You can select to share computer sound or not. You can select the screen or the window or the content that you want to share. And we're going to go through these now in a little bit more detail. So firstly, looking at some of the different ways to present. So when you hit the share tray, one of the first options you've got is screen. And what this allows you to do is to select one of your monitors or screens and display all of the content from that screen. The next one is to select a window. So maybe you don't want to share the whole screen, and risk kind of a notification popping up or something in the background that you wish you'd not shared. You can choose just one specific window. So, the PowerPoint slideshow, for example, or a Word document. And what you can do is kind of, carry on working around that without people seeing the other stuff that's on your computer. And then the last one is PowerPoint Live. So there is Microsoft Whiteboard and, the content from camera and stuff as well, but we'll just focus on the three main ones today. So PowerPoint Live, what it's going to show you here is a list of recent files that you've got saved in Microsoft 365, which you can open using PowerPoint Live. And we'll come on to that in more detail shortly. Before that, though, we're going to have a look at presenting via screen share. And this will share the entire screen. And it is often used to display PowerPoints in slideshow mode. But I think sometimes what people don't realise is actually that they could risk sharing far more than they intended. So if you look at the image we've got here, so you hit the share tray, you select the screen you want to share. And what should happen is you get a red border around the screen that you're sharing, so you know that that's the active window, like this. And then there's an additional control bar visible at the top of the screen being shared as well. And within this, you've got some additional controls that allow you to change things during the session. So let's have a look at some of the dynamic presenter modes that we've got, first of all. Now, if I move forward, so you can see here, I'm on top of the content. So this is standout mode. And essentially what I'm doing is standing out from the content. So using this, if you share the full screen in PowerPoint, by using this, you essentially overlay yourself on top of the content. And this is great for people who, who kind of want to get, want to be a little bit more front and center with their content, but maybe don't know how to use tools like OBS, for example, which is, it's what a lot of people use during the last year or so to kind of achieve the same outcome. It's super simple. It's super easy to use. The thing that the gotcha for me with this one is that it's putting you over the top of content on your slide. So for the image we've got on screen, it's nice and easy because it's just a photograph. But when this was the only presenter mode that was available, it was quite a little bit frustrating for me because I was like presenting my normal slides and suddenly you've got my big head like slap bang over the content in the corner. So that's something to be really cognizant of if you're using this. Will you need to go through and rework the slides to make sure that people can still see the content, because actually that's probably just as if not more important than them seeing your face. So I do like it, but this isn't the winner for me. Then the next mode that we've got is side by side. So again, you see, it's the same content, but it's showing it side by side with my camera feed, which is more powerful, I think. And this is easy to use because I'm not having to go in and change any of my content. It's just showing it normally. You could change the background that you've got that surrounds this. There are a few that you can choose from. There's another gotcha with this one. The thing to kind of be aware of is the size of the screen that the audience are going to be using to look at this, because you can see how small this is in comparison, really. So if you've got a really detailed slide with, tons of charts and detail, it might be difficult for people to read this on a small screen. So again, it's just something to be aware of. And just to call your attention to the top of the screen. So again, just to make sure that you're really clear, kind of, you've got the boxes in the middle, and the way that you move between these different modes is just by clicking the different pictures. So I've highlighted the one that applies to each of them as we go through. And then if I move through to the last one, so this is reporter view. I should have actually got, like a picture of the UK weather map or something to put behind me, like someone reading the weather out on the news. But again, this is just a different dynamic way of showing content. You've got the person being slightly bigger on this one. And again, I like this. I like these for being able to make your content more engaging. And arguably, so that there's probably only a couple of main reasons why I'd still present, and this is one of them actually. So this is an easy way to make your content look good. And just to kind of look at some of the pros and cons of presenting via screen share a little bit more effectively. So a real pro for me, I've mentioned accessibility a couple of times, but a real pro for me is the fact that I, as a presenter, can turn on subtitles within PowerPoint and it will automatically be on the screen. So, so I can turn on the subtitles in PowerPoint and everybody sees them and no one has to do anything to go and get them, which is super, super powerful. It does work best if you've got one presenter who's driving the content and speaking. So if you imagine you're doing like a big client presentation, you've got 4 people speaking, I do 10 slides, the next person does 10 slides, and so on. If I share like this, so if I use the PowerPoint app, put it into slideshow mode and then share the full screen, I'm essentially driving the content. And then what that means is that, you know, I can move my slides forward at my pace, but then when it gets to the next person, they have to ask me to move the slide on when they're ready, or I have to really, really be on top of listening for the cues to move forward. So it, you know, just from how slick it looks, how professional it, you know, this works best if you've got one presenter who's driving the content and speaking. One thing I do love with this is if edits are made to the deck, they will update in real time. So if you've got a PowerPoint deck open in, you know, in slideshow mode and it's saved in the cloud and someone else is updating it, it will automatically update in real time. And actually, I am going to show you what this looks like. I will show you what this looks like in just 1 second. There you go. So you can just see I've just added loads of random X's into the middle of that second point. So I like that. I like, you know, again, if you're doing a presentation, you know, maybe you're talking to a customer and they mention something in the introduction, and someone just kind of goes and updates something on a later slide, so it looks like you're playing back what they've said to you. You know, the fact that you can do that and the presentation in the slideshow mode updates in real time, super powerful. So the other pro as well is, you know, for compared to the options we're going to go through shortly, there are more options available for dynamic presenter modes here, so that you've got some more options to control how you look and how the kind of camera and content is displayed on screen, which is great. Some of the cons, some of the things that I see people struggling with, you know, if you're sharing PowerPoint in slideshow mode, you need more than one screen to be able to do this effectively in Teams. The amount of Teams meeting calls I'm on where you've got someone who's presenting and they say, I can't see the Teams meeting, I won't know if you put your hand up, or I can't see your comments. And I just think it, you know, it doesn't need to be like this. That we've got the tools to be able to kind of have your cake and eat it. So the fact that you know, sharing like this needs more than one screen, I think can be challenging for some people. It's super easy to overshare. So I've mentioned this already, but you know, it's super easy to inadvertently share something confidential or notification toasts that are popping up. Next slide, please. So difficult for other presenters to move slides forward. Standout mode, as I've mentioned already, this may cover slide content, may require some rework. And actually, the other thing to kind of factor in there as well is if you're delivering a kick-ass presentation in a Teams meeting and it's recorded, and you've decided that you're going to use standout mode because you think it's really good. So you go in, you rework all your content, you basically carve out the content from the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So you've got content at the top and either side of you. And then you record it. Well, the recording doesn't it doesn't capture where you are yet on standout mode. So if someone comes back and watches the recording, it's just going to look like you've got big empty spaces in the bottom of your screen. So that's another thing to factor in as well. And then the last point, which I think can be it's an interesting one to be aware of, but if I'm presenting my full screen from my house, it requires a stronger network connection to send up everything that I can see to the people in the meeting. So sometimes for people who've got dodgy bandwidth, if they start sharing their screen, they can start having kind of dropouts and performance issues in the meeting. So that's another con to think of for this one. Okay, so let's move on to our next option then. And so this is a personal pet peeve of mine. I am on a personal mission to eliminate this phrase from the collective lexicon of my organisation and anybody that I get a chance to say this to, actually. So for those of you who are not in the UK, you might not know who this chap is, but for those of us you in the UK, you absolutely are going to know who this is and what this is about. And over the course of the last 18 months, we've had to sit through numerous presentations from Chris Whitty about COVID, and this phrase has become, it's just one of my most hated phrases now. Next slide, please. There is no reason whatsoever why any of us need to say this anymore when we're presenting via Teams. And this is the time where I'm going to show you how to use PowerPoint Live to eliminate that phrase and to supercharge your presentation so that you can deliver your Teams meetings like a professional. Okay, so with PowerPoint Live, there are a couple of different ways that you can share content. The first one is to use the share tray that we were looking at in the Teams meeting controls earlier. So hit share, scroll down, and then at the bottom, it will show you a list of the recent PowerPoint slides that you've accessed in Microsoft 365. Another option that you've got as well is present in Teams in PowerPoint. Now, if you go to a PowerPoint deck you've got open and you don't see this present in Teams button, it's highly likely that that file isn't saved in Microsoft 365 and that you maybe you've opened it from an email attachment or you've got it saved locally. So you'll only have the present in Teams button available when the file is eligible to be presented in Teams. And when you hit the present in Teams button, now the first thing that you need to make sure actually is that you're in a Teams meeting, because if you're not in a Teams meeting, it's going to be like, well, where am I sending this to? Where am I actually presenting it? So you need to be in a Teams meeting. You hit present in Teams on the PowerPoint deck that you've got open, and then it will move to the meeting as the active window, and you'll get this little warning that says you're about to present in this organisation. And to carry on presenting, you hit present, and what that will do is essentially take this file and it caches it into the Teams meeting at the point that you upload it. So that's quite an important thing to note, because one of the pros for presenting via a full screen share was that you could actually edit on the fly. So you can make changes in the background and the slide content would update in real time, which is quite powerful in some scenarios. Now, you can't do that with PowerPoint Live because it's caching it at the point of you sharing. So if we think about, like walking through the steps with this. So I hit present in Teams, start sharing my deck. My colleague comes and updates the deck, expecting that change to be visible when we get to that slide. But it won't update until or unless one of us reshares the content back into the meeting. So that's something that's really, really important to be aware of. Now, let's have a look at some of the controls and features that we've got for PowerPoint Live. And what you can see on the screen at the moment is essentially me sharing this deck into a Teams meeting with my good friend and colleague Luke Evans, who's joined me actually on many of my previous sessions. And what you can see is essentially the Teams meeting. So the chat's visible. You've got PowerPoint meeting notes for each slide that can be seen. I can view the participants. So if you look along the top, I can click the participants button. I can click all of those buttons that we were running through in the Teams meeting basics earlier. So I can view the participants. I can see raised hands. I can mute people. I can see comments that are coming in. Underneath the slide, you can see I've got some additional laser pointer and highlighter controls, which can help me draw attention to areas of my slide that I want to. And I can actually see the upcoming slides as well. So instantly, you can see how this makes it much easier to keep track of what's going on in the Teams meeting, because I can see what I'm presenting, I can see what I need to say, I can see what's coming next. I can see everybody in the meeting. I can see their cameras. I can see their chat. I can see and interact with everything, and it's keeping it all within the context of the Teams meeting. So I'm not having to have the Teams meeting on one window and the PowerPoint deck on another and presenter view in a different window. I've got everything that I need in one window, which makes it super, super helpful. And, I mentioned the presenter modes for sharing with full screen. Now, PowerPoint Live actually does include standout mode. And what you can see at the top is the same buttons that we had on the control bar for sharing via full screen as well. So you can just, in exactly the same way, you just toggle those buttons on and off. And if I turn standout mode on, what that does is pops my camera over the top of the content. So again, actually, you can use this to, to kind of make your content a bit more engaging. But again, it comes with the same caveat, which is you're going to be on top of your content. So there's going to be some rework that's needed. But I am hopeful, actually, that means that we might see some of the other standout modes coming along as well. Okay, so zooming in a little bit into the PowerPoint Live view in the Teams meeting, and I just wanted to draw your attention to this little eye symbol at the top. You toggle this button on or off to control whether people can scroll through content or not. So when you first share with PowerPoint Live, so either selecting the file in the share tray or if you hit the Presenting Teams button, this is typically defaulted to on. And what that means is that the people who are watching can skip ahead of your content. And I always turn this off because in my view, if I am presenting, I've got a journey that I want to take my audience on. I've got a story that I want to tell them. And, I don't want them getting to the punchline or, the end of the story until I'm ready for them to do that. So, I always turn this off just to stop people skipping ahead and to make sure that I am able to control the pace and the way in which the message lands that I want to share with them. And the screenshot that I've just popped up on the bottom right of the screen, you'll see we've got a sync to presenter. So, what's happened in this scenario is that Luke has actually skipped ahead of my slide because I didn't turn the eye off. And he can see that he's on a different slide to me. So that button gives him the ability to jump back to where the presenter is or forward, depending on what direction he's moved in. But usually, to be perfectly honest, I turn this off. I don't like people rushing ahead with my content. It might be personal preference, but that's kind of my view. And this is my probably favourite thing about PowerPoint Live, especially when you're presenting with other people. And that is that it's super, super, super easy for multiple presenters to be able to deliver content in a really, really slick and seamless and professional way. So the screenshot that you're looking at, the main screenshot, is one that Luke took as the attendee in my meeting. And what you can see is the take control button at the top. So he's in my meeting, he hits take control. And what happens is that all of the basically all of the presenter view moves to him, and what I get is the attendee view. And this little box that we've got at the bottom, it says another user took control. Someone else is now in control of the presentation. So what that's telling me is that somebody else has taken control away from me and can now move the deck forward. And I have the option actually to take that back as well. So I can take control, Luke can take control, we can pass that between us. And for me, this is just so powerful, because if you think about that really annoying phrase, next slide please, this is how we're going to get rid of it. So think of a scenario where you've got 4 people delivering a client presentation, and you've each got 10 slides each, like I articulated earlier. So using PowerPoint Live, I can share my content into the Teams meeting. I can move forward on my slides, and then when we get to the point where Luke needs to take over, for example, he just hits take control, and moves his slide forward, and nobody needs to say a word. And as far as the audience is concerned, unless they've spotted that the name has changed in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, they will be none the wiser. It will just look incredibly slick, incredibly professional, incredibly seamless and rehearsed, and it's just such a simple thing that can have a real big impact on how the presentation is perceived. So this I think is it's one of my most favourite features, and something that I encourage everybody to practice and to learn how to use. So if you are presenting with other people, go and play around with this and make sure that you're comfortable with taking and passing that control around, so that when it comes to doing it in the real world, it just looks brilliant. Okay, so what else can we do in PowerPoint then? That maybe we can't. What else can we do in PowerPoint Live that we can't do if we're sharing full screen? Now, this is again something that I absolutely love from an inclusion perspective. The ability to translate, not just kind of subtitles, which is impressive anyway, but the ability to translate slide content. And this only works because we're sharing and caching something that is in M365 again. But the way to do this, so this is an attendee thing. This isn't something I can do as a presenter. This is about an attendee. So in this instance, Luke, going into the meeting and choosing to translate the content into a language of their choosing. So you've got the little ellipsis again at the bottom. You click on that, and then you click on Translate Slides, and then you choose the language that you want to translate to. So in this example, we translated the content into French, which, I mean, you can see I can't read French. I'm assuming that that's right, but it's so easy to take my English content and translate that into French. So, like I said, attendees can hit the ellipsis, select the language to translate slides into. Once they choose the language, all slides will be translated. And then the other one that you've got is subtitles. So, again, subtitles is a user-specific setting. So it's something I do for me. It's not something you can push out to everybody. And that is the ability to turn on and off live captions in the meeting. So going back to the basic Teams meeting config we were looking at, the controls we were looking at earlier, you've got the ellipsis at the top. If you hit that, then from within there you can turn on and off live captions. There's also a little CC button in the top left of the meeting as well that will allow you to do the same thing. And when you've turned this on, the live captions appear at the bottom and they have speaker attribution on them. So what do I mean by that? Well, it tells you who said something. So it tells you, in this case, it tells you that I said those things. But if me and Luke are both talking, it will have his name next to his comments and my name next to my comments, which is super, 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 super powerful. And, if we think back to the comments I made around PowerPoint subtitles, there's just, from an accessibility perspective, there's just kind of a nuance to be aware of here as well. So in PowerPoint, under the slideshow settings, I can turn on live captions to be on automatically by default. And then I could put that into slideshow mode and present that into Teams. And what that would do is when I talk, it would have my subtitles on the bottom of the screen. Only when I talk though. So if you're delivering a joint presentation, so for example, if me and Luke are both presenting and I did all of those things that I've just described, then I'll talk and it will have my subtitles, and then Luke will chip in with his bit and he won't have any subtitles for him because it's only applying them from my device that's actually put the deck into slideshow mode. So that is a really important nuance, and using subtitles like that generally only works well if you've got one single presenter in that scenario. Whereas the subtitles that you get, the live captions that you get in Teams meeting will capture everybody. They will capture, and I'll give you real-time subtitles for everybody in the meeting with their name against them. But like I said, it's not something that I can turn on for everybody. People who need this have to select to turn it on for themselves. But in my view, we should be telling people about this at the start of the meeting. We should be, we should be pointing out the fact that if this is something that will benefit them, here's how you go and turn it on. So I think that's just a useful nuance to understand. Okay, so some of the pros and cons then for presenting via PowerPoint Live. So let's have a look at the pros first. Well, as you could tell, I got super excited. It is super easy for other presenters to take control seamlessly. There is a laser pointer, so you've got the laser pointer and the highlighters, which make it easy to draw attention to content. Meeting notes, chat, raised hands, all of that meeting context is visible to the presenter, which is so valuable, especially for people who've only got one screen. And because this is sharing content that's saved in Microsoft 365, actually it's better for people who've got crappy bandwidth at home. Because, like I said, if you're sharing the full screen, you're pushing content up from where you are. But with this, you're kind of just saying, okay, share this stuff from the cloud to the people in this call. So it works better for those with low bandwidth. And you do also get the dynamic standout mode, like I said, but obviously you just need to be aware that there's maybe some slide content rework required. And the slide content, that automatic translation is just fantastic. And then some of the cons, like I said, the slides are cached at the point of sharing. Subtitles, you can't use the subtitles from PowerPoint, like I said, and the standout mode may cover slide content as well. The other thing that's not on here actually that I also find with PowerPoint Live is that it's best used for presentations, whether it's you presenting or a group of people. I don't find it works so well for kind of brainstorming and capturing actions. So one of the things that we do sometimes, if we're working through our thinking, is we'll have a deck up on screen and we'll work collaboratively through and edit it. And you actually need to share the full screen, maybe with the PowerPoint deck in edit mode, to do that. Because you can't do that in PowerPoint Live. It's only showing kind of the presenter view. It's not letting you actually work on that collaboratively. Okay, so tips and tricks then. Last slide. So here's just some final things just to just kind of take away with you really, just to help you kind of move your presenting to the next level. A key one is planning. So plan your presentation ahead of time. Think about how you're going to present in teams. If you think back to kind of the purpose of your meeting and the format that you're going to run it in, it's really important to know whether you're showing content to people, whether you're wanting people to work collaboratively, because that will determine which form of presenter mode you want to, how you want to present the content in teams, whether you want to use PowerPoint Live, whether you want to share the whole screen with PowerPoint that way. And you want to make sure your content looks tip-top as well. So, don't just throw some words on a slide, but spend some time really polishing your PowerPoint and making it look good. And practice the flow of it as well, and just make sure that you're really comfortable with with what you're saying and how you're saying it. And a really good way to do this is to actually use the PowerPoint Presenter Coach, which can help you with things like timings and breathing. And are you using things like too much? I know one of mine that I use all the time is so PowerPoint Presenter Coach can actually help coach you through getting rid of some of these things. Practice. I know I said plan already, but practice. Super important. For important sessions, practice presenting together as well. So practice as a team, presenting in teams. If you are using PowerPoint Live and you're passing control backwards and forwards, practice. You need to make sure that everybody who is going to have control is comfortable with the experience, and you need to make sure that there's a contingency as well. So what if someone can't take control of the deck? How are you going to move that section forward? Have you got a fallback for someone to actually present in full screen slideshow mode, for example. So practice. You know, if you want to present like a superstar, you have to put the work in and make sure that you are comfortable with all the controls. You've got contingencies. You know what to do if something goes wrong, because then in the event that something does go wrong, you're already prepared for it. You want to be inclusive, so accessibility 101, make sure your slides are accessible, make sure that the fonts are accessible, make sure that you've not got too much text, too small text. Use the accessibility checker in PowerPoint, get it to check your content, fix the things it tells you to fix. From a tech perspective, make sure your camera, your lighting, your mic, your PC are all set up for success. You know, you don't want to you put all this time and effort into your presentation and the skills to use Teams properly, only for people to spend an hour looking up your nose, or, you know, with like a window behind you and you being completely in shadow. So make sure that, you know, you've got the right lighting, you've got the setup, you've got your sound all set up properly. And then the last thing, just enjoy it. You know, put the work in. Make sure that when it comes to it, you kind of you know what you're doing, and then when you're in the presentation, just enjoy it. You know, by that point, you should feel confident. It should feel natural to you. You know, you should be able to use the tools with ease, and just enjoy it. You know, it can feel really great, I think, when you pull all of these things together and you manage to deliver something really well. Okay, so that's the end of my content. There's nothing else for me to say really, apart from thank you. Thank you to Festive Tech Calendar for agreeing to have me on. Thank you to the audience for watching. I hope you found this useful. And Merry Christmas. You know, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. Enjoy the festive break. Make sure you eat, you drink if you drink. Make sure you be merry. Get lots of rest and come back recharged for a big year in 2022. Thanks, everyone.